Today's podcast is about a very mysterious death. It's probably one of the most bizarre that you will hear about if you haven't yet heard about it. I usually don't cover cases that have gotten a lot of attention and would rather shine a light on ones that need to be talked about more. But I'll make an exception for this one. It is a case where the person is not missing, but his last few hours and the way that he died is cloaked in so much mystery and controversy. Even though it is now over 20 years later, there are still so many unanswered questions. Let's talk about Jonathan Luna. I want to warn everyone that there are aspects in this case that are very graphic and may be hard to hear. If you don't feel comfortable with the disturbing details, you may not want to listen. I usually avoid these kind of details, but in this death, it can't be avoided. Jonathan Luna was born on October 21st, 1965, to Paul and Rosella Luna and grew up in South Bronx, New York. He initially enrolled at Hunter College, but then transferred to and later graduated from Fordham University. He would be accepted into the prestigious University of North Carolina School of Law and would graduate from there in 1992. While in college, Luna would meet his wife, Angela Hopkins, who was in medical school, on a blind date. The couple would wed in August of 1993. Out of college, Luna first worked at the law firm of Arnold and Porter in Washington, D.C. from 93 to 94, and then he worked for the Federal Trade Commission from 94 to 97. After working 3 years at the FTC, Jonathan Luna then worked as a prosecutor in Brooklyn before eventually moving to Baltimore to become an assistant U.S. attorney. The 38-year-old attorney would show up to work at the federal courthouse in Baltimore, Maryland on December 3, 2003. He was in the middle of prosecuting the trial of rapper Dion Lionel Smith and Walter O'Reilly Poindexter, who were charged with running a major heroin trafficking ring out of their Stash House Records music studio in Baltimore. Luna had spent the morning in court and the evening speaking with defense attorneys. Defense attorney Arcangelo Tuminelli said that he last saw Luna at 6 p.m. Wednesday night after finishing up a meeting where both sides had agreed to a plea deal. Luna said that he would finish the paperwork for the plea bargain that evening. He then went home to his Howard County townhouse for a few hours and returned back to the office around 8:30 p.m. At 9:06 p.m. that night, Jonathan Luna left a voicemail for defense attorney Tuminelli, telling him that once again that he planned to finish the plea deal paperwork that night and would fax copies to him and attorney Ravenel as they would need it the next morning. Tuminelli said that he was told by a senior official in the U.S. Attorney's Office that Luna had left the underground garage in his car that night at 11:20 p.m. Strangely, Luna would leave behind his laptop, cell phone, and glasses that he used for driving. Jonathan Luna would leave the U.S. District Courthouse in Baltimore that night, but there are conflicting reports about what he did next. There is a report from the Intelligencer Journal in 2003 that claims a federal law enforcement official, speaking anonymously, said that according to his wife, Luna got a call at his home that night and left about midnight. However, more recent accounts say that he did not go home to his townhouse, but instead from the office, he would head northeast on Interstate 95. He used his Easy Pass to cross into Delaware, but after 3 toll interchanges, he would inexplicably switch to buying toll tickets. At 12:57 a.m., $200 was withdrawn from Luna's bank account from the ATM at the JFK Plaza Service Center near Newark, Delaware. At approximately 2:47 a.m., he crossed the Delaware River toll bridge to the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and at 3:20 a.m., his debit card was used to buy gas at the Sunoco King of Prussia Service Plaza. At 4:04 a.m., Luna's car exited the turnpike at the Reading-Lancaster interchange. On December 4th at 5 a.m., drilling company employee Daniel Gammon of Sensenig and Weaver Well Drilling in Denver, Pennsylvania, about 70 miles from Baltimore, arrived for work. He didn't see anything out of the ordinary, so he went into his office to make coffee. When he went outside 30 minutes later, he spotted a flashing red light behind the parking lot at the edge of the property near a creek. He shined the headlights of his company truck toward the unknown object. He was surprised at what he saw. A silver Honda Accord with Maryland plates was still running with its nose down, teetering on the 4-foot embankment of a creek. He looked inside and saw a child's empty car seat in the back. He also saw blood smeared on the driver's side door. He then called 911. Authorities would soon arrive and view the suspicious scene. They noticed that the car also had blood smears on the front left fender and a pool of blood on the rear seat floor. That was not all that they noticed. There was a man face down in the creek near the car. He was wearing a suit with a black overcoat and had a court ID around his neck. It was Jonathan Luna. He was dead. The body was transported to the Lancaster County Medical Examiner's office. The same day he was found, December 4, 2003, Lancaster County Coroner Dr. Barry Walp and forensic pathologist Dr. Wayne Ross performed an autopsy. The preliminary report said that Jonathan Luna had water in his lungs and the cause of his death was drowning. But the autopsy showed some other injuries. There was a wound to the right side of the head. There were 36 stab wounds to Luna's body in his neck and upper shoulder area. Most of these wounds were superficial. However, several deep cuts had caused internal hemorrhaging. It appeared that these wounds were caused by a small knife, such as a pocket knife, but there was reportedly no weapon found at the scene. Because of the stab wounds, both doctors thought that Luna's death was a homicide and classified it as such. Then on December 15, 2003, a funeral was held for Jonathan Luna at the Longreach Church of God in Columbia, Maryland. The church was adorned with lighted Christmas trees, wreaths, and red poinsettias. More than 1,000 people showed up and 8 eulogies were given. Luna was remembered as a loving husband, father, a playful prankster, and a passionate public servant. In addition to his wife Angela, Jonathan would leave behind 2 very young sons, aged 5 years and 10 months. The FBI started an investigation right away. The first thought was that Jonathan Luna's death could be related to his work as a federal prosecutor, possibly even related to the drug trafficking case that he was working on when he died. However, the theory on the current case being a reason seemed to be dismissed early. Both defendants were in jail when Luna died, and they would eventually agree to the plea deal that he had prepared, so there didn't seem to be a motive for them to want him dead. As far as any other cases, of course with being a federal prosecutor, you make your fair share of enemies. Some of them could be powerful with dangerous connections, but there didn't seem to be any particular case or person of interest that would stand out. While this case was being thoroughly investigated, friends and colleagues would mourn the loss of their beloved friend and co-worker. The Monday after Luna's death, many employees in his office wore black ribbons and the courthouse flag flew at half-staff. Jonathan Luna's boss, Maryland U.S. Attorney Thomas Tabigio, said that, "Let there be no doubt that everyone in law enforcement are united. We will find out who did this." U.S. District Court Judge William Quarles, Jr., who was presiding over Luna's last case, said tearfully, "When you're older like me, it doesn't seem right that someone younger than yourself will die, especially someone of his youth and vigor and passion." There was something noteworthy that was happening around the time that Jonathan Luna died. In September of 2002, Luna and attorney Rodriguez Coss had won a conviction in a bank robbery case against Naco Ray Brown. About $38,000 in cash was briefly introduced as evidence in the trial. Shortly after the trial, the money disappeared somewhere between the courtroom and the evidence storage area. The money had still not been located, so the investigation had continued. Several people had taken polygraph tests. According to the Baltimore Sun, Luna was about to take a polygraph test concerning the missing money. He had already canceled the test once, citing work as the reason, and it had been rescheduled and was to occur shortly after his death. Jonathan Luna's family and personal friends were all convinced that he was murdered, and it probably involved a case that he had worked on while working as a federal prosecutor in Baltimore. Then some interesting information would come out in an interview with his father. According to Paul Luna, his son had apparently traveled to the Philadelphia area in the months before his death. The last time his father saw Jonathan was on Thanksgiving Day, which was on November 27th that year. That day, he reminded his son of their plans for Jonathan to take his dad into New York City. Jonathan's reply to him was, "Not this week, Dad, I'm sorry, because I have a case. I have to go to Pennsylvania." Paul Luna said that he didn't know what case it was related to, and that his son didn't usually share that type of information with him. This comment from the attorney is noteworthy because the trial that Jonathan Luna was prosecuting was being held in Baltimore, not Pennsylvania. But he would take a mystery trip into Pennsylvania just 6 days later, where his body would be found. Even though there was a search involving at least 100 state police cadets around the creek right after Luna's body was found, nothing of interest turned up. Then 3 months after his death, in early February of 2004, authorities reported that they had recently found Jonathan Luna's penknife. It was located in the stream near where his body was found. It would subsequently be identified as the weapon that caused the stab wounds that Jonathan Luna had been inflicted with. Even though the coroner and forensic pathologists would classify his death as a homicide, the FBI would soon share their thoughts. Let's just say that their opinion surprised many. The FBI was considering if Jonathan Luna had actually committed suicide. They had found no connection to anyone that he had prosecuted having any kind of vendetta or wanting retribution. A federal investigator was quoted as saying, "In a professional rub-out, they'd put one in the back of your head and dump you in the harbor. There's something else going on here we don't see." FBI agent April Brooks also stated that they had performed an exhaustive investigation and said that there was no evidence that Jonathan Luna met with or had contact with anybody that evening. They believed that he was alone from the time he left the courthouse to the time he was found in the water. The FBI had even asked the coroner to reclassify Luna's death as a suicide, but he refused. During the FBI's investigation, they would piece together the route that Jonathan Luna took that night using electronic toll and credit card receipts, surveillance videos, and interviews with workers who may have seen him, for example, possibly at rest stops. As they pieced it together, it only seemed to add to the mystery. Why did Jonathan Luna take a roundabout route through 3 states to ultimately get to a rural, out-of-the-way spot in the middle of the night? If Luna had wanted to go to that specific area, 2 highway routes would have taken him there in just over an hour. But the route that he took added over an hour to his trip if Lancaster County was his destination. As is common, some of the eyewitness sightings contradict each other or were found to have inaccurate details. For example, there are occasional mentions online that claim that Luna filled up 2 tanks of gas. However, after viewing the surveillance video and interviewing employees, it was clear that he only filled up 1 car and was not traveling with the second vehicle. There was another possible sighting at a Roy Rogers restaurant at a rest stop in Elverson, but according to their investigation, the FBI doesn't believe that he could have been there during the time frame of the sighting. After Luna's death, the investigation would also reveal that everything was not going smoothly at his job. He was apparently under some stress there, and colleagues said that Luna had clashed with his boss U.S. Attorney Thomas DiBaggio. They also thought that he was trying to push Luna out. They said that Jonathan was even in fear of losing his job and had hired his own attorney to represent him on job-related issues. DiBaggio refuted all of the claims and stated that Luna was not in fear of losing his job at the time of his death. As part of their comprehensive investigation and no real leads as far as anyone wanting retaliation, the focus then turned to taking a closer look at Jonathan Luna's personal life. According to his family and friends, he was happily married, a devoted father, and wasn't involved in anything dangerous or shady in his private life, that they were aware of anyway. But the more they looked into it, the more things came up in his private life that were unknown and unexplained. According to reports, at one time the FBI had suspected Luna of having an affair with one of its agents. No definitive evidence ever surfaced, but during their investigation, the FBI searched her computer without her consent. An FBI investigation of the internet also turned up posts on adult sites placed by a man named Jonathan Luna seeking female sex partners. There was a much younger person by that name who was a convicted sex offender. There was also a dating site from 1997 with a profile bearing his name and described the person as a black professional interested in white women. In a Time magazine article from 2003, they were able to locate 2 internet personal ads dated from 1997 that match Luna's age, marital status, and were signed with his 3 initials but backwards. They weren't able to 100% tie these profiles to the prosecutor, but it was a compelling lead. They also discovered that Jonathan Luna was in debt. Some reports say that he had as many as 16 credit cards and as much as $25,000 in credit card debt. At least one of the credit cards his wife was unaware of. It was also discovered during their investigation that Jonathan Luna had filled out a loan application in the amount of $30,000. However, it was reportedly canceled. Reports say the cancellation was not long after the money that was evidence in the bank robbery went missing. After Jonathan Luna was discovered dead, some people speculated if it could be related to another unsolved case that had happened just 2 years earlier. Thomas Wales was a federal prosecutor and gun control activist. He was hired in 1983 as an assistant U.S. attorney for the U.S. Attorney's Office in Seattle, Washington, where he specialized in fraud prosecutions. He was also very active with civic organizations and public service. On the evening of Thursday, October 12, 2001, Thomas Wales was working at his home in the basement office. An unknown male avoided security lights in his backyard and shot Wales through the basement window. He was hit twice, once in the neck and once in the chest. A neighbor heard the gunshots and dialed 911. Wales would be taken to the hospital, but unfortunately died the next day. He is believed to be the only U.S. federal prosecutor in history to be assassinated. The FBI investigated his case diligently, but it remains unsolved to this day. They are convinced that he was murdered by a hitman. They would also say in 2018 that they had found evidence strongly suggesting that Wales was murdered by a contract killer because of a conspiracy involving a small group of people. Ultimately, there wasn't anything found by the FBI to indicate that Jonathan Luna's death and Thomas Wales' murder were related. In February of 2007, a PI and an attorney, both hired by Luna's family, would seek to have the Lancaster County coroner conduct an inquest into Luna's death. An earlier request for the same hearing had been denied. This request would be denied also. It was also reported in an article from NBC News that Jonathan Luna's father, Paul, wanted the autopsy report unsealed. He was told that the request would have to come from his wife, and so far she had not requested it. In 2019, newspaper publisher L&P Media Group requested a copy of Jonathan Luna's autopsy records from the Lancaster County Coroner's Office. The district attorney office replied to the request, and only said, "The coroner has no records relating to Jonathan Luna." Then, after denying it for months, the records were found amongst the archives in the basement at the Lancaster Government Center. Upon hearing this, the DA quickly moved to have the records sealed. In response, the LNP then filed an emergency order to have the records made public. Ultimately, agreeing with the DA's office that making the record public could affect an ongoing investigation, Judge David Ashworth ordered that the records remain sealed. They remain sealed to this day. There hasn't been any new information to come out in Jonathan Luna's death recently. His case seemed to have grown cold, and his autopsy records still hidden from the public. Now it is time for my thoughts on this case. It may surprise you to know that I agree with the FBI and lean toward Jonathan Luna's death being a suicide. I'll explain to you how I came to that conclusion. Let's talk about the case for his death to be a murder. He would have had to have been with someone that night at some point. Yet in all of the sightings of him, he was alone. There was also no standout case or person who was mentioned that had any animosity towards him that we are aware of. As far as the case he was working on at the time, it was said that the defendants wanted this plea deal and even that the requests had been met. So why have him killed? Even though the court case went on that next morning, despite Jonathan Luna not showing up, why would you have him killed before the plea deal could be completed that you were in favor of? However, one thing that gives me pause is why he stopped at the ATM that night and got $200. Why would he do that? There is no clear-cut answer, of course, and from what they say, all that money was found in his car. Perhaps he took it out because he wanted to have money on him for whatever reason. I will say that I don't think the outcome that ultimately happened was something that he had planned when he left Baltimore that night. The only scenario I could think of that might involve someone else were the mystery trips to Philadelphia in the time before his death. There are two different versions, but if Jonathan did receive a phone call late that night and then left, could he have went to meet up with someone in that area? I still think that the majority of that night he spent by himself. Or did the person tell him something in that call that really upset him, so he frantically leaves in his car, leaving behind his phone and glasses? As far as the case for it being a suicide, I believe that Jonathan Luna had a secret life that no one knew about. He had been traveling to the area not far from where he was found in the weeks prior, according to his father. Yet no one knows why or what for. I believe that he didn't want anyone to know his whereabouts that night, which is why he eventually stopped using his Easy Pass and changed to paper tickets. There is at least a chance that he was seeking companionship on dating sites. If the profile did belong to him, was there a person he was meeting up with during those apparently secret trips to Philadelphia? He was seen leaving alone that night and was alone every time he was seen, and also alone when he was found. Also, if you're going to kill someone, why would you stab them repeatedly, most of the wounds causing no harm? Then when they didn't die from the injuries, you decide to put them face down in a creek so they could drown. The murder theory has just never made sense to me. The blood found and where it was made sense to me in the suicide theory. I believe this assault on himself was not something planned. I believe for whatever reason, Luna was feeling desperate and hopeless about something. Most of the stab wounds were superficial, but some were more severe. I believe that it started in the front seat, then he got out, which would account for the blood smears on the driver's door, then perhaps sat or laid down in the back seat. Perhaps he thought the best way to continue, and for it to end quicker, was to go in the water. I believe that this is when he is struggling, no doubt suffering from blood loss, and there is a blood transfer on the front fender near where his body would be found. Also, the medical examiner said that there were absolutely no defensive wounds. You're not going to let someone stab you that many times without fighting them off. There are a few reports of knife wounds to his back and even his genitals. That all of the wounds were to his neck and upper shoulder area. There were also, according to some reports, various cuts on Jonathan's hand. To me, this also indicates that he inflicted wounds on himself based on that and no defensive wounds. If there were any other wounds in other areas, according to some coroners who were questioned, they could have come from the autopsy itself. Unfortunately, I knew someone that killed himself similar to this way many years ago. I only bring this up to show you that it can and does happen. He was an elderly man with health challenges. He was able to stab himself in the heart 5 times, which eventually killed him. It was clear that it was his choice and no foul play. He even left a suicide note behind. Before I went through this personally, I would not have thought that it was possible. I don't believe that if Luna did commit suicide, that it was pre-planned. He left to an unknown area abruptly without telling anyone where he was going. He was driving around in a nonsensical fashion, which just shows what kind of a mental state that he was in that night. He was really struggling with something. Did Jonathan steal the $38,000 from the evidence room? It sounds much more likely when you learn that he had canceled a $30,000 loan application around the same time. If he did do it, then in all probability, he was slated to take a polygraph test that he likely would not be able to pass. If he was found guilty of the theft, he would know that it was likely that his career would be over and his reputation ruined. I think that in an act of desperation that night, and whether he was thinking logically or not, that Jonathan Luna decided to put an end to the inner turmoil that he was currently going through. Whatever your opinion is on who is responsible for the death, I want to say that his death does not define what kind of person that Jonathan Luna was during his life. People spoke of him with such kindness and respect and talked of what a great person he was. He worked diligently on serving out justice, and he put a lot of bad people behind bars. I don't want us to lose sight of that due to the bizarre way that he died. It doesn't appear that we will ever get all of the answers to that night or know what Jonathan Luna was thinking when he went on that late night trip, so in reality, this will never be a case closed. I hope that you enjoyed my podcast on Jonathan Luna. If you did, please leave me a rating or review on your favorite podcast app and share my podcast with whomever you think might be interested. You can find me on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and Apple Podcasts under one word, Lost and Found Podcast. You can read all of my original articles as well as links to my most recent podcast at my website at Lost and Found Blogs. I have social media pages on Facebook, X, and Instagram under that name as well. I also have a Patreon under Lost and Found Podcast where I cover even more lesser-known missing person cases, so check it out. You can reach me via email at lostandfoundpodcast@yahoo. And remember that cold cases stay cold because their story stops getting told.